Scandal. The Attorney General of the state promotes the prosecutors who refuse to hand over to Julio Iglesias the investigation into the sexual assault complaint that the prosecutor's office itself dismissed. Let's begin. Hello and welcome to a new edition of Precautionary Measures with Miguel Ángel Pérez. And in Spain, with Sanchismo in the middle, there isn't a single day of peace, not a single day without a scandal happening. And pay close attention because today we're going to reveal another new scandal that has just happened in these past few days. And the truth is that with so many corruption cases, with so much exclusive information about the illness of the Prime Minister, Pedro Sánchez, a cardiovascular condition that we revealed exclusively on Precautionary Measures with Miguel Ángel Pérez and on Libertad Digital. Well, other topics have gone a bit unnoticed, and of course we start to investigate them. And pay attention to what I have to tell you today, because what has happened in the prosecutor's office these days is beyond words. And the victim is Julio Iglesias. The victim is the artist Julio Iglesias. Let's share this information on screen, as always, so we can analyze it much more easily. Because the truth is, like I said, there's no rest with this government. Alleged corruption everywhere, and also scandals and controversies. The Attorney General, Teresa Peramato, has promoted the prosecutors responsible for not giving Julio Iglesias the contents of the investigation being carried out by the prosecutor's office. The artist after the complaint filed by two of his former employees for an alleged sexual assault. This pre-procedural investigation was already closed in January by the public prosecutor's office after secretly taking statements from the two complainants. If you remember well, then suddenly, the newspaper .es and Univision reported that Julio Iglesias had been accused of sexual assault, crimes against workers, human trafficking, and so on. By two of his former employees, that complaint had been filed. It was submitted to the National Court Prosecutor's Office by these two former employees. And also by the association Women's Link Worldwide. You know, that controversial association. Well, the prosecutor's office investigated it. They didn't let Julio Iglesias appear in person, and hey, what happened then? They ended up closing the case. They ended up closing the case at the end of January after taking statements in secret from these two former employees as witnesses, protected by video conference. And Julio Iglesias' defense, led by José Antonio Choclán, said, "Give me a copy of the investigation you just closed because I need it." Because maybe, well, you know, I might take legal action, right? Julio Iglesias wants to see this through to the end, clear his name, and maybe he filed a lawsuit for false accusation against these two former employees and the association, and of course also took legal action against the newspaper .es and Univision. Well, so what happened? The prosecutor's office has now definitively refused to hand over that investigation they carried out, which is already closed. Why is the prosecutor's office withholding the investigation? That's the big question. What did they do? So, what did they say at the National Court Prosecutor's Office? This has to be consulted with the Technical Secretariat of the State Attorney General's Office of Teresa Peramato, and that's how they kept buying themselves weeks. And finally, last week, the verdict from that Technical Secretariat of the Attorney General, Teresa Peramato, became known, which was conveyed by the National Court Prosecutor's Office. That the entire content of the investigation of the whole procedure wasn't going to be handed over, not just the complaint, but also the statements of the two former employees, any document included in the file of that investigation carried out by the prosecutor's office. In the meantime, what do we know? Well, look, Peramato, the Attorney General, promoted the former head of the Technical Secretariat last Friday. The department, the one that was in charge of deciding whether or not a copy of the entire procedure could be handed over to Julio Iglesias. Well, she has promoted Ana Garcia León to Chief Prosecutor of the Criminal Chamber of the Supreme Court, even though she lacks experience in criminal appeals, okay? The Attorney General also rewarded the Deputy Prosecutor of the Technical Secretariat until now, that is, the number 2 of the Technical Secretariat of the same department, Diego Villafañe, with the position of Prosecutor of the Supreme Court, which is the highest rank. Both Garcia León and Villafañe were prosecutors who had the full trust of the former Attorney General Álvaro García Ortiz, who was convicted by the Supreme Court for the crime of revealing secrets. After the leak against the boyfriend of the President of Madrid, Isabel Díaz Ayuso, Alberto González Amador, It is worth noting that Villafañe was at one point charged in the case against García Ortiz, although the investigation against him was eventually closed. Tanto García León como Villafañe was part of the self-proclaimed Fortuny team because, as you know, the State Attorney General's office is headquartered on Fortuny Street in Madrid. And both of them are also, coincidentally, members of the Progressive Union of Prosecutors, UPF, which is the left-wing association of prosecutors. Dolores Delgado, Álvaro García Ortiz, Teresa Peramato, and so on. Well, according to prosecutorial sources consulted by Medidas Cautelares and Libertad Digital, they reported the scene involving Secretary García León and Villafañe after they were the ones responsible for blocking Julio Iglesias. From the Technical Secretariat of the Prosecutor's Office, the content of the investigation has already been filed away. They say his promotion is a scandal, it's rude and blatant. The ones affected by these promotions have been the prosecutors from the 1-0 case, Consuelo Madrigal and Jaime Moreno, who, let's say, were aspiring to the position, which has now gone to García León. The chief prosecutor of Madrid, Zalmudena Lastra, who reported García Ortiz's maneuvers in the prosecutor's office against the partner of Isabel Díaz Ayuso, was also aspiring, in this case, to Villafañe's position in the Supreme Court. The defense of Iglesias, led by José Antonio Choclán, has requested from the prosecutor's office since January and on numerous occasions the contents of the investigation carried out by the prosecutor's office itself. These requests coincided with the time when Ana García León was being replaced as chief prosecutor of the Technical Secretariat. Julio Cano, who took office at the end of January, they add. That is, the person responsible for the Technical Secretariat was just leaving the position and her replacement came in to take over. Obviously, if you'll pardon the redundancy, right at the end of January, which was when I was already reiterating the defense of Julio Iglesias. That, please, they give him a copy of the complaint of the procedure. And at that moment, the National Court Prosecutor's Office was sending it to the Technical Secretariat right in the middle of that transition. The Technical Secretariat of the Prosecutor's Office, let me remind you, for those who don't know, it offers ongoing legal and technical support to the Attorney General for leading the Public Prosecutor's Office. And it carries out studies, investigations, and reports that the Attorney General considers necessary. The same sources consulted emphasize that it is inexplicable that the prosecutor's office has definitively refused to provide Julio Iglesias with the content of the main procedural investigation carried out by the public prosecutor's office. Does this decision only further fuel the hypothesis that Pedro Sanchez's government has allegedly plotted a conspiracy with the prosecutor's office against the artist? And they ask themselves, is there something to hide about the complaint, or does the prosecutor's office want to cover up the statements made as protected witnesses by the two complainants? Those are two questions that still remain unanswered. In the meantime, what is Julio Iglesias going to do? Well, he's not going to just sit back and do nothing. As we can all imagine, the people close to Julio Iglesias that we've spoken to tell us that the singer's defense will appeal the prosecutor's refusal to hand over the contents of the investigation through administrative litigation. Specifically, an appeal for protection of fundamental rights will be filed with the Central Administrative Court of the National Court. Since, in the end, it is the prosecutor's office of the National Court that has issued this decision that we learned about last week. What reasons did the National Court Prosecutor's Office give? After consulting with the Technical Secretariat, that Technical Secretariat which included the two promoted individuals, Villafañe and García León. The Prosecutor's Office said it was not appropriate to provide the requested documentation. And all of this without prejudice to informing Julio Iglesias that in accordance with the aforementioned circular he may access its full content, or by submitting a request to the judicial body responsible for handling any claims you may file through that channel, in which case a record of the investigative proceedings initiated by this prosecutor's office will be sent. In other words, they were leaving, let's say, the way open for Julio Iglesias to appeal to the administrative court, so that finally he can be given a copy of what was investigated, of what was done. From the most relevant part, by the way, it doesn't count actually, no? I understand and acknowledge receipt. Enunciada el contenido de la investigación y de la denuncia. Cuando no lo quieres, nagratotellastro, tienes algo que ocultar. Y claro, teniendo en cuenta que cuando se conoció esta historia, hubo mucho rumor. Moran. Some speculate the government created a smokescreen to prompt discussion. For example, take the case of Paco Salazar, who was a direct advisor to Pedro Sanchez and who had also been accused by several women of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, and so on. Of course, that was when we found out about Julio Iglesias. This is another misdeed, allegedly, from the Moncloa production factory in collaboration with the prosecutor's office. Well, of course, this could explain why they haven't given the complaint and all the related documents to Julio Iglesias himself. Does Julio Iglesias have the right to know why he was investigated, what he was investigated for, and what that complaint said? And what did those two former employees of his say in their statements as protected witnesses? Of course, Julio Iglesias has the right to know because then he has to take legal action to clear his name, like filing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, the media outlets that have published this. Or, for false accusation, file a complaint against the two former employees and against the association Women's Light Worldwide, which was the one that pushed them, the one that led them to report these events to the National Court Prosecutor's Office. This is an absolute defenselessness of our artist, Julio Iglesias. And all of this with a whiff, with suspicions that there's something fishy going on here and that something is being hidden. Anyway, any updates about this case, you already know where you'll find them. Here on Precautionary Measures with Miguel Angel Perez. That's it for this edition of Precautionary Measures with Miguel Angel Perez. And once again, as I always do and will never get tired of doing, I want to thank you all for your support, for being there, for your encouraging messages, and also for continuing to become members, which is a way to support this community. Or Precautionary Measures with Miguel Angel Perez for less than €3 a month like the Chosen ones, or for less than €7 a month like the Supreme ones. You can also make contributions via Bizum, whatever each of you can. You know I value everything equally. At 627-556-370, 627-55. Leave me your comments. What do you think about this story? That they don't want to give Julio Iglesias the whole procedure. To me, honestly, it stinks. It really stinks. It smells like Sanchez. It stinks. Well, like Moncloa, like everything. Leave me your comments. And as I always tell you, the most important thing is that it reaches everyone because information is power. See you soon. See you.